Can the Philadelphia Eagles finally wrap up the NFC East? And who wins the big NFC North bout between the Minnesota Vikings and Green Bay Packers? The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show starts now.
It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 17 in the NFL is here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, and from the prime time game of Commanders and Falcons to the big 425 matchup with the Packers and the Vikings to why the Eagles and Cowboys game matters a lot this week. We're going to go game by game to make you the most informed fan for game day with the help of our local experts who will be going over key predictions, key storylines, keys to victory, and so much more. So let's start off with the Cowboys and the Eagles game. That's a big NFC East matchup between the two teams. Philadelphia couldn't close out the NFC East last week. They're going to be looking to do that this week. And we have Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys and Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles talking about which team will come out on top.
All right, we are wrapping up Crossover Thursday right here on the Locked On Eagles and Locked On Cowboys podcast, getting into keys to victory. Marcus, if there were three things that you said, this is why the Dallas Cowboys won on Sunday in Philadelphia, what would be those reasons?
First of all, they got to take care of the ball. They can't afford to have 6 turnovers and win the game. They're just not that type of offense. It's not going to happen 2 weeks in a row. So we've seen the Cowboys do a better job over the last couple of weeks, and that's why they've been competitive. So if Cooper Rush and the offense can hold onto the football, even if you're just kicking field goals, you're going to have a chance to stay in this one. Protect the football. On defense, you have to find ways to get Philadelphia to 3rd and long because I doubt very much that Kenny Pickett against Mike Zimmer's ridiculous blitz packages is going to be able to bail them out of situations. The last thing you want are 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 2s, where they can just hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley. So Get into 3rd and manageable on defense, and I think they're going to have a good chance to survive. And number 3, your stars have to play like stars. Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb have been awesome in the last month. Micah's been the best edge rusher since coming back. CeeDee Lamb's continue to put up big numbers. If your star players can play like stars, maybe you'll have a chance to stay in this game and pull off another upset victory. It's going to be tough. It's going to be an uphill challenge for the Cowboys, but they've done it against some better teams over the last couple of weeks. We'll see if they can do it in this one.
Yeah, I think that's a main reason or a number one key victory for the Eagles as well that I'm looking at. A reason that the Cowboys could win this game is if Kenny Pickett turns the ball over. Do not turn the football over, especially in your own end, and make it 3rd down and manageable because, like you said, Mike Zimmer, he brings the heat. Kenny Pickett last week did not handle the blitz all that well when the Commanders were giving him those aggressive looks. So that's definitely something I'm looking at. And when it comes to the Eagles' defense, I think they got to stop the run game. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, obviously that's a player that's one of the best in the league at wide receiver. Of course, stopping him, he's been on a roll these last 3 games, on an absolute tear statistically. But they have to make sure, like the same thing with Kenny Pickett, they can get Cooper Rush into 2nd, 3rd, and long situations, make him throw the football so then the Eagles pass rush can pin their ears back and just go attack. Bryce Huff's going to be likely playing in this game too, so they'll add another pass rusher into that 4-man edge rotation. So those are a couple of my key victories. And then, of course, be creative in finding ways to get Saquon Barkley the football because he's going to have to be the one that carries you, I think, on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like one of those games where the Eagles are like, hey, Saquon, you're getting 25, 27 touches. Win this game and you'll have week 18 off. And maybe he'll want to play against the Giants to set the record. Saquon doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that cares that much about it. I think he would rather have the week off going into the postseason.
Although setting the record against the Giants would be incredible, let me tell you. Like no, but you're right. You're right.
Schedule makers might have known that he was going to have a good year. I wouldn't be surprised if they're asking Saquon Barkley to go out and win this game for them. I think he could have a really good game. Although Dallas has done a good job, at least historically, of slowing down Saquon Barkley. Then again, he's only played with this Philadelphia offensive line once against them. So I would expect this to be a massive Saquon game.
So FanDuel right now, Marcus, as you said, the line has switched over to what, 7.5? It looks like
7.5. Yep.
What do you like in that? Are you picking the Cowboys to cover there?
To me, it feels like the Cowboys got, I don't want to say their signature win, but they're a big win against Tampa Bay last night last week on Sunday Night Football. They're just overmatched talent-wise. They have a ton of injuries. Even someone like CeeDee Lamb, who's been gutting through a shoulder injury. I don't even know if he's going to be able to play this week. He didn't play hardly at all in the second half. I got to imagine that the Eagles, coming off a loss, are going to want to take care of business. Yeah. I would take the Eagles, but I'm looking at that point total of 40. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes under. This very much, Louis, feels to me like a 23-13 type of game.
It does look like I'm actually going to take the Cowboys to cover that 7.5 line. I think the Eagles will win the football game outright, so I would take the money line. But I'm looking at the weather too. There could be rain in Philadelphia Sunday afternoon. Kenny Pickett, smallest hands in the league at quarterback, or at least in the bottom. So not sure if that's going to help out either. So this, you're right, Marcus. This could be like a defensive, grinded out kind of game in the second half. I think it'll be close for a little bit.
I won't be surprised if this game is over by like 3:30 Eastern time.
Yeah.
Like both teams are just trying to run the ball, get out of this one.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of reason for both of these teams to try to air it out too much. Dallas is just going to want to try to extend this game and keep it close as long as possible. And I think Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore are going to do everything in their power to make sure that Kenny Pickett isn't exposed to some of the blitz packages in this one.
Eagles are wearing Kelly green as well in this game. They have not lost in the vintage uniforms. So if you're a jersey statistic guy, then that's something else to keep an eye on.
At least if Dallas loses, they're going to lose to a team wearing their best uniform.
At least they're going to look good. Yeah, this is going to be a great jersey aesthetic game.
Yeah,
they have not worn the Kelly greens with the classic cowboy white as well. So it's going to be
amazing.
A great jersey battle for sure. The aesthetic's going to look better than the actual gameplay
absolutely
on the field.
Louis is great, and so is Marcus. Check Louis out over at Locked On Eagles. Check Marcus out at Locked On Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, the New York Jets have had a pretty disappointing season overall. They'll be taking on their AFC East rivals in the Buffalo Bills, who look incredible. They struggled a bit last week against the Patriots, but they were able to pull out the victory. Joe Marino of Locked On Bills and John Butchko of Locked On Jets talk about which team will be able to win this matchup and keys to victory for both sides.
I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, here for your Crossover Thursday preview of Bills Jets in Week 17. And Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, John, it's time for us to talk about the path to victory for each team in this football game. Obviously, the Bills are at home. They're favorites. I think 9.5 points is kind of where I've seen the line for this football game. The Bills were 14-point favorites over the Patriots. They won by 3. The division games are always a little bit tricky. Teams that know each other. And while, there's still a lot of familiarity here between these two teams. I know that there's been some changes with the Jets, but these teams know each other well. They know the type of football that they want to play. What's the path here for the Jets to go get an upset win on the road?
Joe, I don't think the Jets can win the game. I think the Bills can lose the game. I think if both of these teams play their best, which we haven't seen the Jets play their best all that much this season, the Bills are going to win the game. I think this is going to have to be like one of those scenarios where maybe the Bills look past the Jets a little bit. Maybe they play a little sloppy football. Maybe they turn the ball over, and the Jets probably need a performance like Devontae Adams had against Jacksonville 2 weeks ago, where went off for close to 200 yards. I think it's going to take something unusual for the Jets to be able to win this game. These teams played a very, very tight game in their first meeting in, I think it was week 6. This is the different scenario for the Jets. I think the losses have piled up. You've seen the frustration mount. It's not clear what the Jets lineup is going to look like for this game. In this game, Quinnen Williams missed the game last week against the Rams, and the Rams just ran the ball at will. The Rams barely tried to throw the ball in that game because they knew they'd be able to run the ball successfully against the Jets. And that first meeting back in October, Bills went out, and that was one of the most physical opening drives you'll ever see, where the Bills barely threw the ball. Maybe they threw it once or twice, went right down the field and scored a touchdown. I just think there have also been some like rumblings, nothing firm, but there have been some rumblings that maybe some Jets players are starting to check out a little bit, looking to the offseason, which happens in the lost season sometimes when you get to week 17. So I think unusual things need to happen. I think the Jets will need some big performances. Again, maybe Devontae Adams has a huge game. Maybe Garrett Wilson has a huge game. I think the Bills need to make mistakes in this game. I think they'll need to turn the ball over. Maybe the Jets need to steal a possession here or there. Run a fake kick or something like that. But I think it's that kind of game. I don't think I think if these teams line up, Buffalo should win. I think there's a lot working against the Jets in this one. So the Jets' path to victory is I think is more, do the Bills lose the game themselves? Because I think if the Bills come out and execute, they're going to win the game.
Yeah, you mentioned that first Bills-Jets game. We remember it well, John. Lazard down the seam, Williams down the red line, right? The red line, that became the phrase of the year, seemingly. And Aaron Rodgers throws Mike Williams under the bus. The next thing you know, he's gone. Interesting situation there. I think you have the right idea on this game. The Bills would need to lose it, and I think they can. I think the Bills have proven throughout their even their time as one of the better teams in the league is that they can have this type of game. They've had it to the Jets before. They've had it to the Patriots. They lost last year to New England, that 4-win team that picked number 3 in the draft. They lost to the Urban Meyer Jaguars. Like, this stuff happens. They will lose a game. Now, typically they don't later in the season. They're very good in December. I think they've lost 3 games since 2020 in December. 2 of them were in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So they take care of their business late typically, but it's obviously interesting with the seeding implications. If the Chiefs win on Christmas Day, which we're recording this before Christmas, so we don't know what happens with that game. The Bills could be in a situation where they can't be the 1 seed and, they can win one of their last 2 and be the 2. Which is probably important to them, but those probably make some careful choices with players and making sure that, they can be healthy and playing their best going into the postseason. So I think you got the right formula there. For me, the Bills' path to victory is, number 1, is get back to being efficient in the passing game offensively. Nervous a little bit about Josh Allen out of that Patriots game where, holding onto the ball, average depth of target, percentage of deep throws, lack of percentage of throws to check downs, some off-target throws. It was like a bad recipe. Not a disaster performance, but it was so far away from what we saw for a long stretch, and it looked a little bit like what we saw back against Houston and Baltimore. That gives me a little bit of a concern. I think he can correct that very quickly. But, nonetheless, a game that you hope doesn't turn into a pattern here down the stretch. Number 2 is the Bills' corners have to win. Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson are good. And the Bills will have Christian Benford, their best corner, who's emerged as one of the best young corners in the entire NFL. But will they get Rasul Douglas back this week? He's missed the last 2 with the knee injury. Kyer Elam has started in place, and Kyer Elam's a first-round pick that's talented, but Rasul Douglas is the more consistent and savvy player in this Bills scheme, and they want to run some more man coverage, which they've kind of cranked up lately, and those will be some good matchups. That's good on good, right? Adams and Wilson versus Benford and Douglas, or Benford and Elam. So that'll be a fun matchup to watch. And, I think obviously they probably want to get some production there for Wilson to get that third 1,000-yard season. So that's a matchup the Bills have to come away with. There's going to be battles won for both sides of it, right? It's good on good. But who's going to win the war, I think, will be a big factor in this game. And then number 3 is don't have a breakdown on special teams. The Bills had one last week. They gave up a fake punt where they weren't ready. They didn't have the right personnel on the field. They gave up a big return to start the game. And the Jets typically are pretty good on special teams. And, when you think about a game that you're worried about getting away from you, that you, like you said, if you go out and just play the game you're supposed to play, the Bills will win this game. But where are the margins? Where can that get away from you? And special teams certainly stands out to me as an opportunity for the Jets to steal a possession or take a possession or get a big play and get points. So the Bills will have to be careful there to not let that be a contributing factor to a letdown game against the Jets.
So I guess we could say great minds think alike. I think we're kind of on the same page in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I think we do see it the same way, but we both acknowledge, that there is a path for both sides of this. And certainly with the Bills coming off of a pretty tight win over New England where they were down 14 before you can blink early in the game. Hopefully that for the Bills side of things, that's a learning lesson, but obviously, it's the National Football League, man. You said you've been watching it for 30 years. Me too, man. It's, how this stuff goes.
Joe, check him out over at Locked On Bills. And for John, check him out over at Locked On Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up here, we got the Panthers and the Buccaneers. NFC South battle. Bryce Young, again, has this Panthers team looking really fun, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are obviously looking to continue to get momentum towards a playoff spot. So Julian Council of Locked On Panthers and James Jericho of Locked On Bucks talk about which team has the edge over the other and whether the Panthers can maybe pull an upset.
Wrapping things up here on a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Bucks. And let's start with the road underdogs. Julian, what are the keys for the Panthers to get a big upset and basically allow Dave Canales to destroy what's left of his former team season?
Yeah, I think ideally, for Panther fans, they would love to get the win, but then also watch Atlanta lose to Washington, because the Bucs fans are like, damn, like, how do we lose this game to the Panthers? So you feel like you've spoiled it for them, and then the next week go and beat Atlanta and then hand Tampa Bay the division. I think that would be the ideal scenario moving forward this season. But as far as this game goes, they're going to give up yardage on the ground. And that's just the reality. This is a run defense that's been awful. It's been historically bad for this franchise, and it's not going to get any better. And they're likely going to give up 200 yards rushing again for the 5th straight week. But if they can make Tampa Bay work for it a little bit more than it did last time, that may lead to success for Carolina. Then also on the offensive side of the ball for Carolina, Chuba Hubbard right now is the NFC Offensive Player of the Week, coming off of a great performance on Sunday against Arizona in that win. They got to lean on him and continue to find some success on the ground like they have so far this season, with Hubbard having his first 1,000-yard rushing season and clearly going to be the guy moving forward at running back for Carolina in 2025 and maybe even in the years to come after that. And then I think about with the pass game, there's guys that got to step up. Xavier Legette may be able to play. He missed last week with a hip injury, also dealing with a groin and a wrist injury he's going to have to take care of after the season of surgery. Him and Jalen Coker are some young guys that the Panthers really want to get more involved. Same thing with JT Sanders, who, since going out of a neck injury and he missed that Tampa game back against KC, he has not been targeted but 2 times, did not get targeted on Sunday. Getting those young guys involved, knowing too that Whitehead, Antoine Winfield Jr. are likely not going to play in this game. Maybe this is an opportunity for the Panthers to take advantage of a banged up secondary. So got to find a way to not just get totally gashed, make them work for it, find success in the run game. They get some of your young rookie receivers involved in the pass game so you can take advantage of a banged up secondary.
All right. And then for the Bucs, it's pretty simple. They got to wake up, they got to feed Bucky and Mike, and they got to stay the course. So they need to understand that they've already used their mulligan here. They were allowed to get 1 loss coming out of the bye. They had to go 6-1 the rest of the way if they were going to win the division. Thought that loss was going to be to the Chargers. Instead, it was to the Cowboys. Playoffs for the Buccaneers start now. They have to wake up and understand that situation, and they have to play to that level. This is officially a playoff game. If they don't win, they're probably going home. So live up to the moment. Do it in front of your home fans. A lot of those people in the stands are probably getting tickets or probably got tickets yesterday for Christmas. They're excited to go and wear their new Buccaneers jerseys and get all hyped and give Dave Canales the business on the sideline. So live up to the moment, play to the way that you're capable of, and you shouldn't have any problem. Then, of course, feed Bucky and Mike. I've already talked about it. Those two are the drivers of the team. You mentioned it earlier. Mike Evans in their first meeting, 118 yards and a touchdown on 8 receptions. Bucky Irving had 25 carries for 152 and a touchdown. He had another 33 yards receiving. He was absolutely dominant. So don't steer away from that. The Bucs against Dallas decided to open up passing the ball over and over and over against a team that was allowing almost 5.5 yards per rush at home.
Insane.
So Liam Cohen, I think, outsmarted himself for that game plan. You don't need to outsmart yourself. Keep it simple. Give Bucky the ball, give Mike the ball, give Rashad the ball, go home with the win, and then stay the course. The defense has been better than people want to give it credit for. They had a shutdown half against Dallas. In the second half, just didn't get enough help from the offense. You do exactly what you did to Chuba Hubbard the first time. You held him to less than 50 yards rushing. Adam Thielen had 99 yards, which was, Okay, that was surprising. Don't let him do that again. But Bryce Young with almost 300 passing yards in that game, you cannot let that happen. You shut down Chuba. You have to get pressure on Bryce Young. You can't let him throw all over the place all day long. So it's Julian, it's going to be an interesting one. It means a ton to this Buccaneers team. Does not mean as much to the Panthers over the course of the rest of this season, but could mean a lot on building towards being. My son said to me the other day, he goes, the Panthers might be kind of scary here in a year or two. And I said, you know what? They're starting to trend in that direction. I would assume you're going to be talking a lot on your show about using draft picks and free agent capital on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, we'll get to that in April. We got to focus more on who's actually going to be calling the defensive plays and what the scheme's going to be before we can talk about what players out of college the Panthers should be drafting. And of course, you have free agency that happens before the draft, and you got to figure out which players you want to bring back, who you want to extend. I know people always want to skip ahead to the draft. A lot more things need to happen before we can really get into the draft evaluations of guys that you hope will help this team. And they have not necessarily done a great job through the years at drafting recently. Now, I do think this draft class, Leggett, I don't know if he's going to be a number one receiver. I highly doubt it at this point in time, but he'll be somebody that can help him down the road. Brooks, that's one that already feels like, oh, man, I don't know if that's ever going to work out. But Trevin Walsh has been good for them at linebacker. He's out for the rest of the season, though, with a shoulder injury. And there's some other guy like JT Sanders. We'll see what this draft class is able to do. This rookie class, you got UDFAs like Damani Richardson, who's likely starting again at safety. You have Jalen Coker, who I mentioned, at wide receiver. A young rookie class that you can try to build around your quarterback, Bryce Young, which is really the main piece. So, yeah, should be an interesting game. We'll see if Carolina can play spoiler for the second week in a row against a team who, again, I feel like they definitely should have beat a couple weeks ago.
Julian has it covered with Panthers coverage over at Locked On Panthers, and James has it covered with Bucks coverage over at Locked On Bucks, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll continue on with the 1 p.m. slate of games. Plenty of other matchups to dive into. Be sure to stay tuned. We'll be back on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime, and I love going to live events during the holidays. I always look forward to making new memories during the holiday, and this holiday season in particular. Gametime is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the flip to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And so there are a lot of great games this weekend in the NFL, and Gametime is the place for you to go looking, especially when it comes to playoffs. They have super deals and other tiers of deals as well. And the app has so many features that are awesome, like Gametime Picks, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We're back here as we keep rolling on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show Week 17 edition. Kevin Ostreicher still here with you, breaking down all of Sunday's action with the help of our local experts. Less games on Sunday and Monday this weekend just because there are so many moving pieces and moving parts with all the other games happening on Christmas on Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. A lot of different games throughout the course of the entire week, so there's less for Sunday, but that doesn't mean there aren't good matchups. Let's continue on with the 1 p.m. slate of games as we have the Indianapolis Colts and the New York Giants. The Colts on the outside looking in the playoff picture right now, and the Giants just having a really rough season overall. So Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts and Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants take you through key matchups, key storylines, and a lot more.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Colts. I'm Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants. He is Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts. And, of course, the Giants host the Colts on Sunday, 1 o'clock kickoff Eastern time at MetLife Stadium. And, Jake, let's talk about the keys to victory. I mean, we'll start with the Colts because, quite honestly, the Giants, I don't know what the keys to victory are. I've got to think about this one. So let's start with you since you're the visitor.
Yeah, so I think we just saw a pretty good example of it for the Colts. Offensively, it was their biggest output of the year on Sunday. also 38 points. It was finally the game we had been waiting to see from them all season. Most of their most important pieces were healthy. Everyone was there. They were facing an inferior opponent, and they finally looked the part, offensively and defensively. Again, like I mentioned, until late in the third quarter, when somehow a 38-7 lead became 38-30, like all within a quarter. So for me, that with the Colts, obviously the key is to run the ball. Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. I mean, Jonathan Taylor went for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns. Anthony had 70 yards. So that's obviously an enormous number, but I think that recipe is what the Colts would like to be how they win games every week. I think they want to be a run-based offense, getting Anthony Richardson involved as well, but Jonathan Taylor really driving the engine. With establishing the run like that, that creates play action opportunities and, just kind of classic run heavy offense, because they do have the guys to take advantage of that. I mean, Alec Pierce was out last week, but he's been in the concussion protocol, but he was able to get in a limited practice on Friday. So hopefully he can come back in time and kind of be their key deep threat that they need him to be. So run the ball, let that kind of breed some play action opportunities for you. Also, that just kind of controls the clock and speeds things up and just gets us all out of here on time, So run the ball defensively. I really like what they did as well. Get some pressure, but create turnovers as well. They've done really well. They had 3 interceptions each in the last 2 weeks. That's usually going to lead to wins. It of course didn't against the Broncos a couple weeks ago, but against opponents that are really struggling like the Giants, that should be pretty good. And then if you get that big lead, number 3 for me, keep it up. Like sportsmanship, feel good stuff, that's great, but you've seen what happens and how quickly a lead can dissipate. A 31-point lead nearly disappeared within a quarter for you guys. If you get that big lead, keep it up defensively, keep bringing pressure, put them away offensively, keep up with the things that got you that lead. The Colts pulled Jonathan Taylor and basically, wasted a couple of drives until the Titans started to come back, and then they put him back there. And then what do you know? They were able to kind of, the offense was able to put it away at the end of the game. So build your lead with the run game, protect it, and then defensively, pressure and creating those turnovers are huge. And it's things we've seen them do really, really well the past couple weeks. So what about the Giants? Is there anything in you that thinks they might have a chance?
Well, I guess there's always a chance as long as you show up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but seriously, I mean, it's going to sound very fundamental here, but the first thing the Giants need to do if they want to have any chance of winning this game is they can't make mistakes that end up costing them. I mean, I'll point to the last drive against the Falcons game as a good example. Now, granted, that drive was in garbage time. There was no way the Giants were going to come back and win. But on that drive, the Giants had half of their penalties the entire game. So they had 10 penalties. I think they had 5 penalties on that one drive alone. They're not good enough to overcome those types of mistakes. And I mentioned earlier about all the pre-snap penalties and playing with discipline. This team has just not done that basically all season long, and it has come back to bite them. You can't have, the quarterback holding on to the ball forever and throwing it late, and now all of a sudden the defender is jumping the route, which we saw in the game as well. So the Giants have got to play as close as possible to a mistake-free game as they can. Whether or not they can do it, I don't know. I mean, they haven't done it in basically all season long, well, except for maybe 2 games, we could say, the 2 ones that they had. But that was just so long ago. It seems like it was an eternity. So that's key number 1. Defensively, look, you're dealing with a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson. You've got to get after him, all right? Now, against the Falcons, who started Michael Penix Jr. for the first time, how many times did the Giants sack him? Guess? Okay. The number of wins that the Giants have at home, which is 0. How many times did the Giants get pressure on Michael Penix Jr. to where they hit him? Just 2. The Giants pass rush started off on fire. At one point they were leading the league in sacks. They have cooled off significantly to where they have something like 5 sacks, I want to say, in their last 6 games. All right, that's not going to get it done. When you have a young quarterback especially, You want to get after him. You want to confuse him. You want to make him throw the ball on your terms. Giants just haven't been able to do that. And when a young quarterback has all that time back there, they can sit there and basically, look like the next Dan Marino. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
so that's going to be a key. And then, look, I'm going to throw in special teams. Last week, special teams didn't cost the Giants, but it just seems like every game at home, special teams does something, whether it's they miss blocks, whether it's they allow a big return, a missed field goal, a shank punt, whatever the case may be. There's always something that pops up with that unit that just makes you say, what are you doing? So field position, starting field position is especially key for a team that is struggling to move the ball, to score, and to give their fans something to cheer about other than the fact that they're en route to getting the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
Yeah, that's tough, man. But I will tell you, again, the Colts have not once maintained like four quarters of complimentary football in their 7 wins. Even they've been really close calls. They let teams stay in it. So if any team is within a score, they've got a chance. So while I do think the Colts win this one, like I'm not going to completely discount the Giants.
You have more confidence than I do, Jake, because the Giants, they get off to a slow start and then teams just run away with the lead. And then it's like, we get into garbage time and that's when they start padding stats and padding the score and all that stuff. And you just can't have that. If the Giants can't get off to a fast start and take a commanding lead and hold that lead, which again, they haven't really been able to do all season long, then, it's going to be another long afternoon for those of us who cover the Giants. So we'll see. You never know. That's why you show up and you play the game. You never know what's going to happen. I know a lot of people will probably be upset if the Giants go on and win that game and the Raiders, keep pace, because that's going to upset the top of the draft order. But we will see. It should be, it's come down to the wire. It's come down to the wire for the Colts, the Giants. It's coming down to the end, mercifully. So we will see how it plays off.
Patricia, check her out over at Locked On Giants. Jake, check him out over at Locked On Colts, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got the Raiders and the Saints here next as your boy Q and Ross Jackson are covering 2 teams that really are just looking ahead to the offseason with absolutely no shot at the playoffs. So Ross and Q will take you through everything that both these teams are playing for or not playing for and what to actually look for in the game.
It is Crossover Thursday here, Locked On Raiders and Locked On Saints. Your boy Q from Locked On Raiders, Ross Jackson here from Locked On Saints. Every one of these Crossover Thursdays brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. You can download the PrizePicks app today and use that promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. We're here to break down the biggest things that each of these teams needs to do to get a win. And Q, I got to tell you, if there's somebody that terrifies me the most as a matchup for this New Orleans Saints defense, it's absolutely tight end Brock Bowers. The Saints have gotten better against tight ends this season a little bit, but boy, they struggled there big time early, and I think they might struggle again against one of the NFL's best.
Brock Bowers is fantastic. I'll tell you this, Ross. He is as advertised and then some. I knew that he was good when the Raiders selected him number 13 overall. I knew that. I mean, just from watching him at Georgia, okay, really good player, cool. That's going to be a good weapon. I didn't know he was 101 catches and over 1,000 yards good. Right? I mean, I didn't know he was going to be that, especially with no Devontae Adams. And, oh, by the way, with a carousel of quarterbacks from Gardner Minshew to Aiden O'Connell to Desmond Ridder, back to Aiden O'Connell. Like, he's had so much change and turnover at the quarterback position, and he's over 1,000 yards, over 100 catches, and he's about to break the single-season record as far as just receptions by a rookie of Puka Nacua of 105. And he's got 2 games to do it. Like, that's wild. I just don't understand. Wild. I don't understand how he's so good. I mean, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. He's been a bright spot on a bad season, but man, he is fantastic. He is as advertised. Ross, I ask every single person that we talk to on these crossovers, and they're fantastic each and every week. What is the plan? How do you try to slow down that dude named Brock Bowers?
Well, thank goodness the New Orleans Saints play in New Orleans because they need to bury a gree-gree somewhere. They need some voodoo dolls. They need to cook up something because they're going to need something otherworldly
to stop this guy. I guess the thing that you're really looking for is, can the matchup with a guy like Demario Davis, can he end up rising to the occasion to limit a little bit of what he does, help to take some of it away? But even then, look, Brock Bowers is going to outsize a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, as scrappy as Tyrann Mathieu is. That's not going to work. If you look at Pete Werner, the speed difference, the athleticism difference, that's going to end up kind of edging things over towards Brock Bowers. That's going to be a really, really tough thing for the New Orleans Saints to stop. So honestly, the biggest and best way to stop Brock Bowers is to keep Aiden O'Connell from getting the ball out of his hands. And so you got to hound him with pressure over on the defensive side, make him make some bad decisions, force him to move off, or look for that check down because he feels the pressure. That's the only way I can think of to keep that ball out of Brock Bowers' hands, and all the yards after catch that he picks up against one of the worst yards after catch defenses in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, 11 catches, 99 yards is what he went for on Sunday against the Jaguars. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, again, 11 catches, and they're going to make sure he gets enough targets to break that record and then some. I mean, obviously you saw a very big effort to feed him on Sunday versus Jacksonville, and they've got 2 more games to get it done. Yeah, he's going to get a ton of targets. Well, so when you look at the Saints, though, and you look at their offense, who would you say is the difference maker as far as the playmaker? Who is their Brock Bowers? Not saying it's the same guy, but who is the guy that can help break the back of a defense?
Honestly, I don't know that they have that guy right now, Q, because it used to be Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
You would probably put, the deep threat wide receiver. He was the guy that was, 80 yards, 75 yards, 63 yards. He could house it from anywhere on the field. Chris Olave was that guy too. Both those guys are done for the season. Although Chris Olave did return to practice this past week, I don't expect that he'll be back after taking a really scary hit week 9 up against the Carolina Panthers. 2 confirmed concussions this season, was checked for an additional one as well. Has like 5 in his NFL or 5 in his career, including college and stuff like that. So they're going to probably take it easy with him. So really the guy that's the most reliable is the question that you have to ask. And the most reliable guy is Foster Moreau. And as you know, Foster Moreau can go out there and make some plays for you, but he's not going to be a game-breaking presence for you. So maybe the Saints are able to get Alvin Kamara back out on the field. He was in the head coach's office. Interim head coach Darren Rizzi told us on Tuesday via conference call that Alvin Kamara was in his office Tuesday morning saying, I want to come back. I want to be back on the field after suffering a groin injury in their loss to the Washington Commanders just a couple weeks ago. So that's going to be maybe the guy to watch. This is a dude that scored 4 or 5 touchdowns up against the Dallas Cowboys earlier this season in week 2. He's ready and raring to get back out on the field. He wants to be out there 50 yards away, Q, from his first ever 1,000-yard rushing season. He's never had one.
Wow,
yeah,
that's
crazy, right?
Yeah, that catches me
Very
off guard.
surprising.
Yeah, that is very surprising. And I'll tell you this, Ross. Hell, if he played the Raiders a couple more times, he'd have got 1,000 yards. He always had his way. I'm telling you, he's always had his way with the Raiders. He's
right.
No matter what he did, catching the ball, running the ball, throwing the ball, like whatever he did. He's like the modern day LaDainian Tomlinson when he's playing against the Raiders. So I'm surprised about that 1,000-yard mark. I did not know. I wasn't aware of that. That's a hell of a nugget right there. And yeah, if he's able to go, I would say right there, that's the guy that he's, like I said, he's the backbreaker for the Raiders. It seems like it doesn't matter what year it is, he has his way with them.
Yeah, he's going to be the big name to watch here in New Orleans, maybe even bigger than Derek Carr, right? Because if Derek Carr goes out there, but he doesn't have Alvin Kamara, it's still a very different game. But if Spencer Rattler is at under center and they do have Alvin Kamara, or Derek Carr is under center and they do have Alvin Kamara, that changes everything for that team. So as we look at that in terms of the Saints' lack of kind of game breakers on offense, what do you look at as the kind of 3 most important things that the Raiders have to get done if they do, or even if they don't have that game breaker over in their offensive side?
They've got to just create turnovers, man. They've got to win the turnover battle. I know that sounds really basic, but last week against Jacksonville was the first game all season where they didn't turn the rock over. Like the first game all season where they didn't turn the rock over. And surprise, surprise, they won. Right? I mean, that's what happens if you don't turn the ball over. Jacoby Myers said that in the locker room. We say, hey man, first game you guys didn't turn the ball over. He said, yeah, that's what happens when you don't turn it over. You win games. They have turned the ball over way too much, and they haven't created enough turnovers. They've got the worst turnover differential in the league. They've turned it over way too many times, and they haven't caused enough. Now, to their credit, the last few weeks, they've been able to force some fumbles. Isaiah Polamau, he was able to create 2. He became the AFC Defensive Player of the Week award recipient for being able to do that against Jacksonville, caused those 2 fumbles, and the Raiders recovered. Think about this, Ross. They recovered their first fumble in week 14. That was their first fumble recovery of the season. It took 14 weeks. Like, that's wild to me. That's just
that's wild.
That's unheard of. I mean, you accidentally come up with a fumble recovery, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, but no, it
Absolutely.
So turnovers.
Yeah, that's going to be big.
Win the turnover battle, create a couple turnovers, and hold on to the ball. You hold on to the ball, you give yourself a chance to win. I'm not guaranteeing you're going to get a win, but at least you'll give yourself a chance.
Yeah, the New Orleans Saints over the course of the last 6 games have been -4 in turnover differential. That's since Dennis Allen was out and Darren Rizzi has become the interim head coach. The Saints generated 14 turnovers over the course of their first 9 games, and the last 6 they've generated a pair. 2.
Wow.
So they have not been a team anymore that has been forcing those turnovers. So that is going to be big to watch in this one. Yeah, right. That works well for the Raiders key. Big one to watch in this one for sure. Meanwhile, they've turned the ball over 6 times over the course of those 6 games. Not one in each game, but that's certainly where they're averaging. 2 other quick things that I'm watching for New Orleans. If Spencer Rattler's under center, obviously you want to keep the pressure off of him. 52.6% of his dropbacks last week up against the Green Bay Packers were under pressure. You're not going to be able to either get any. You're not going to be able to get the best out of the kid if he's under pressure like that. You're certainly not going to be able to get any evaluation of him if he's under pressure like that. And I think too, the other thing is that the Saints just simply have to be able to run the football, and maybe for Clint Kubiak's sake, prove that they can do something on offense, even if they're not able to. But Q, I think you and I hit this one on the head. It's got to be about the game breakers, whether having one or not having one, and it's got to be about the turnovers in this game. This should be an old school, and I'm going to use one of my favorite words here from back in I used to love wrestling back in the day. Okay. Needs to be an old school slobber knocker out there between these 2 teams that are kind of limping to the finish line. It needs to feel like a race, but we know it's going to be a limp by the time it's all said and done.
Well, I'm about to say a slobber knocker doesn't sound like it's going to go fast. A slobber knocker sounds like it's slow. A slobber knocker sounds like it's aggressive and physical and mean. And guess what, Ross? I'm here for it. Let's do it.
I'm here for it, man.
It's in the Big Easy too. What could go wrong?
Ain't that the truth? Hey, it's not like they don't have anywhere to go after the game. They'll be fine. Exactly. They'll be fine when it's all said and done.
Be sure you support Ross over at Locked On Saints, and be sure you support Q over at Locked On Raiders, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last up in the 1 p.m. slate is the Tennessee Titans and Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 AFC South teams that, again, are not playing for anything but draft position. So you have Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans and Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars. These 2 teams know each other well, but which one is actually going to come out with a win?
Rolling along here on the Thursday crossover. All of our Thursday crossovers across the Locked On Podcast Network are sponsored and brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app and use the code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Talking to Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, and I am Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars. No, we ain't wrestling. Usually when we see each other, we're going to tear up some furniture and wrestle and argue with each other like we do sometimes, but it's a really all love and friendly debate between Tyler and I, both hosts of the Locked On NFL show. Now, keys to victory, a victory that I don't believe either one of us particularly wants to happen, but somebody has to play. I think for the Jaguars, the keys to victory is get off the field on 3rd down, stop doing dumb penalties. Now, this might, when you have 2 bad teams, this might be the same thing. Get off the field on 3rd down, stop the dumb penalties that extend possessions for the other team, and find a way to create turnovers. Tyler, I'm going to blow your mind. The Jaguars have 8 turnovers this year that they have created. That is, I've never seen a number that low in my life. There's some teams that get 5 and 6 turnovers in one game.
Yes.
They have 8 for the entire season.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's bad. Well, I'm going to blow your mind, Tony. The Titans have 31 turnovers on offense this year as a team. This year, 31. Even Brian Callahan called that insane. So I think both of us, I'll go into my keys to victory, but the reality with this game is it's like, which dumb kid in class is less dumb? You know what I mean? It's not like what we need is we don't need our teams to go out and do something. It's what we need them not to do if they want to win. That it's not go do this. It's don't do this with our teams. And for the Titans, turnovers. 4 turnovers last week, 4 turnovers the week before. Like, again, the turnover, if you turn over the ball, you're going to lose because the Titans aren't good enough to stop it. And then stop the run. The Titans gave up 330 rushing yards last week to the Indianapolis Colts when you know that the quarterback can't throw and all they want to do is run, and you still couldn't do anything about it. And I think a lot of that had to do with the Titans have young linebackers right now. Kenneth Murray, who isn't very good anyways, he's hurt. Luke Gifford, who's a special teams only player, but one of the best inside linebackers on the team, he's out. Jerome Baker has been terrible. Now we're playing Cedric Gray, a rookie who missed most of the season with an injury, and James Williams, a 7th-round rookie who's transitioning from being a safety at the University of Miami, who I know you've seen James Williams, you heard of James Williams in high school. He's been a safety his whole life. He's transitioning to play linebacker, and Cedric Gray and James Williams were lost all week last week against the Colts run defense. Like, it was embarrassing how bad they were. And the Titans have a backup safety in, and Darryl Worley, who they picked up off waivers this year. Amani Hooker is a very good player in pass coverage, but he has had a very bad year in run defense with his angles and his tackling. So, like, if the Titans don't stop the run and they turn over the ball, they're going to get smoked. And the final thing for me is special teams. The Titans have been terrible on special teams all year long. They have a and I feel like when the Titans play the Jaguars find a way to win on special teams and influence the game. They've had some pretty good special teams units. I know it's not been perfect, but they've had some good special teams elements in recent years. So turnovers, run defense, special teams, that's what the Titans have to focus on if they want to win.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, I fully expect Mason Rudolph to be the better quarterback on the field this weekend. And I fully expect the Tennessee Titans to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Me too.
You can see it coming, man. I actually thought the Jaguars should have won the previous matchup that they played. Or did the Jaguars? I think the Jaguars did. Yeah, we did beat.
So, did either team really win? It felt like both teams lost with the way the game
and that's why I wanted to point this out. You mentioned 2 dumb kids in class. It's like if one kid is standing up at the board. I almost laughed when you said it. It's like a kid. It's like me and you, right? Look, what if it's me and you, and I turn and I'm at the board, and we got this little thing that when I cough, I'm gonna actually look between my arm, and you're gonna hold up something to tell me the answer, right? And the teacher goes, what's 10 minus 5? And I'm standing there and I'm trying to count on my fingers. She said, no fingers. And I cough and I look back, and you got this sign that goes, how much is a field goal in the NFL? And I write 3, and we're both wrong because it ain't 3. The answer's 5. So 2 dumb kids that can't get out of their own way. That's just who we are this weekend, man. It is ironic that for 2 groups of people that usually beat up on each other and pick at each other, that we look just alike. So whatever
I don't think anyone's in any situation. No one's in a situation to pick on anybody else.
No, not at all. So for me, the keys is to keep everybody healthy, and it's to the point where there are some guys, and you're this late in the season, and I know they don't do load management, but like you said, if there's anything, I don't care if it's a hangnail, if there's an ingrown toenail that could keep Trayvon Walker and Brian Thomas Jr. and the rest of those guys from playing once they hit their incentives or hit their benchmarks for their career, I would snatch them out so fast, because you lose a guy now, you might be losing him for the first part of the season. This is where you don't want somebody who has a lot of value, like Foyle O'Connor, your starting Mike linebacker, or your starting corner. You don't want to get that torn pec muscle that's going to keep them out until November next year. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, everything's about next year for these teams right now. And the last thing that you want is a major injury that can impact not only next season, but like you want these guys to have a healthy offseason, especially your young players that you're talking about who are continuing to grow as players and learning. Like Brian Thomas Jr. cannot afford to miss out on this offseason, because we know that when you're coming from the draft, after your college season ends, you start training for the combine. You start training for draft stuff, which is not the same as training for football. You know what I mean? It's totally different things that you're training for. So that first offseason in the NFL for a young player is so, so critical. You do not want to have them get any kind of major injury. And I feel the same for, any of the young players on the Titans, quite honestly. You know what I mean? That you just cannot afford to have anybody who you need next year get hurt in any of these meaningless games.
You can find Tony over at Locked On Jaguars. You can find Tyler over at Locked On Titans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, we're going to move into the 4 p.m. slate of games because there's a big NFC North matchup that you do not want to miss. Stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. They have the Great American Story and a lot more courses as well. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Which NFC North powerhouse will come out on top between the Green Bay Packers and Minnesota Vikings in Week 17? I'm Kevin Ostreicher. This is the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, where with the help of our local experts, we bring you the biggest storylines, keys to victory, and so much more from all of this week's NFL action. The Packers and the Vikings, they've been great all season alongside the Detroit Lions in that NFC North division. But the Packers and Vikings have a big matchup in Week 17. So Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings and Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers take you through which team will be able to get the better of the other.
All right, moving on here with the Locked On Vikings and Locked On Packers crossover. Peter, I think a huge key to all of these games has to be, I mean, it's the most cliche one ever, but I have to bring up turnovers because the Vikings were so turnover prone early in the year.
Yeah.
But we have gone, I think, 6 games, and Sam Darnold's touchdown to interception ratio is 15-1. And the one was a 4th down where it was like smarter to throw it up than it was to like get an incompletion. It ended up costing yards for the Bears. It was on Monday night. He has protected the ball incredibly, but I think if we want to talk about like what those opportunities are on defense for the Packers, it's generating those turnovers. Maybe you can get Aaron Jones to get his fumbleitis back. We got an Aaron Jones fumbleitis moment here. I don't know if you caught that. But that should be shocking, I think, to Packers fans, right? Like that happened.
But I mean, not in a big game. Not in a big game because Aaron Jones has had some big fumbles in big games, unfortunately.
I think it was against like the Titans. Like it was weird.
Yeah, that is weird. Yeah, a couple weeks ago, right? He fumbled 3 times or something in a game. The turnovers, this is,
like how do the Packers want to generate turnovers, I guess is my question.
Well, there's 2 ways. One is in the backfield. On the quarterback. So we saw it.
It's the Xavier McKinney thing.
Nickel pressure, Keyshawn Nixon gets a sack fumble on Spencer Rattler. Those kinds of, they've done the thing. And so I had Evan Williams for Locked On Vikings fans who are not as interested in Locked On Packers day to day as our everydayers. I had Evan Williams, the Packers safety, on last week. And I asked him, I said, hey, did you watch that Vikings game and that Texans game and go, all this simulated pressure, like this kind of works. Like we should try and like do some more of this stuff. And in the second half,
game planning.
and look, I was like half joking about it, but he kind of refused to tell me. And so I was like, okay, maybe that's there's a little realness in there.
You're talking about faking pressure, like showing a bunch of people on the lines and then backing off with a 4-man rush,
which is a Brian Flores specialty. And
that happens all the time.
Sack fumble on Sam Darnold in that first game off a simulated pressure where they only bring 4 technically, but Keyshawn Nixon is unblocked off the edge and it turns into a sack fumble. Same thing happened against Spencer Rattler where you get the sack fumble with guys off the edge. They've been doing it.
The running backs have screwed those up a lot for the Vikings, and that's who you got to be attacked. You got to like make the running back think, and they've made some mistakes all over the depth chart, not just Jones, but CJ Ham.
You and I were joking about it the other day on Twitter, where you showed a picture of that was not even simulated pressure. That was all out pressure. They showed it and brought it, and the running back looks right at the linebacker coming up the middle and goes, "I'll go to the outside."
And goes and gets the guy on the edge.
And so
that's the 3rd time that's happened this year. So I don't know what that is, either an exploit in like the way they do it, or the running back's brains just keep falling out,
or both. But and then on the other side, so not to bring up Evan Williams again, but what he said was he wants the Packers to be the Jeff Hafley wants the Packers to be the best disguised team in the NFL. And so they pride themselves on, like, they've gotten to our pal Rich Madrid over at Acme Packing Company has charted, and I'm sure this is a similar number for the Vikings, but charted the number of ways just getting pre-snap to inverted cover 2
And it's like 9 different ways pre-snap they've showed something and then gotten to inverted cover 2. So like those kinds of things where it's basically Tampa 2, but your corners and safeties flip responsibilities. That's something that Brian Flores likes to do too.
For sure.
And so
it takes away a lot of the quick stuff. It takes away like you can't run like slant flat when you don't, if you are like misdiagnosing the coverage pre-snap, like it relies on a pre-snap diagnosis. But what the Vikings do is they never do anything quick, which is also exploitable from a pressure perspective. But that kind of like the coverage will have declared by the time Darnold needs to make a decision.
Right. Well, and this is where I was getting to this is if you look at it is the case, and it is very weird. If you look at the best quarterbacks under pressure this season, Sam Darnold is among them, whether you're looking at Pro Football Focus grade, rating when pressured, those kinds of things. But just overall, he still has one of the higher turnover-worthy play rates in the league. He's 7th in turnover-worthy play rates as graded by Pro Football Focus. So to your point, he is taking care of the football in outcome, but the process can still be a little wonky at times. And I think for the Packers, they're going to need to create some turnovers. They're going to need to catch the ball. The old Charles Woodson line. If you caught every pass as a defender that the quarterback throws right to you, you're an all-pro. So just make the plays that are presented to you. And I think the Packers are going to have to do that if they want to win this game, because it's just this team is too good down to down, play to play to think you can just line up and consistently beat them. And I think that's where they are for the Vikings. Like, this offense has been the weaker of the 2 units, which is weird to say for Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones and Jordan Addison and Kevin O'Connell. But offensively, like what is the matchup that you feel like they can exploit against Green Bay? Like, what are they going to have to do to score enough to hang with the Packers, who are going to be able, they score 30 points on everyone now?
Well, yeah, the Packers have been so banged up in the secondary all year long.
Yeah.
Don't know what the heck's going on with Jair Alexander and all that, but there have to be matchups there. And outside of the second game last year, which was, the Jaren Hall disaster thing, there's been 2 other games that Jordan Addison has played as a Viking against the Packers, and he's smoked them both times, both of the Lambeau games. So I'm looking at this one and saying, okay, is
Joe Barry's not walking through that door, but yes, I understand.
Well, he got him really bad week 4 too.
Yeah.
So even if they find the way to, slow down Justin Jefferson, even if they do the same, like 2-man, Jair Alexander, press the heck out of Justin Jefferson, mug him at the line, be physical. That's
that
the
was
kind
fun,
of
that game.
that's a lot of teams have found that to be the only way to get Justin Jefferson not to put up 150 on him. But very few of those teams have found a way to win the game anyways, because when they do that, that usually is going to leave Hawkinson or Addison one-on-one, or it requires 2 high alignments, and that means you're running on them. And so the Vikings have punished that really bad. So, but let's say they find a way to slow down Jefferson. What's the matchup that Addison will have feels like he's kind of had the Packers number in terms of getting that separation at the very least. Cause I think he got he was hurt actually in that second game. So of course he didn't go off. He was out. But in the game last year. So when he's playing, he does great against the Packers. So is Addison the Packer killer? I think that's something to watch. But I think it's got to be those matchups on the outside, and can they find a way, especially to be physical, and that's maybe the thing we haven't talked about enough here is how physical the Packers are, how physical the Vikings are, and how I think whoever wins that thing up front and gets that push has this advantage where who can force the other guy to put a safety in the box, and then you suddenly get a one-on-one you really like. That's really, I think, the tipping point. As soon as somebody starts getting those one-on-ones, then I think, the quarterback can make the throw.
I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, because we as you mentioned, I just watched the Packers beat up a Saints team that, they did not have to beat up the way that they did. Like the physical
like JV Saints. Well, they play pissed off in December, and that's a LaFleur thing, right? Like that's
and to do it, I started calling it with the Toyotathon Jordan Love thing. I started calling it the December to remember Matt LaFleur, because he's got the best December record ever for a modern coach. He's got a better December record than Vince freaking Lombardi at this point in his NFL career, which is remarkable. And they have started to really play a nasty, mean brand of football. And I know that it's not going to be cold in Minnesota indoors. It will probably be very cold outside. But I think that that's one of those things. Like if you're going to meet the moment that the Vikings are going to bring to bear with all the, like, they went out and they're the 1 seed, right? So
Yeah.
If you're going to meet that moment, if you're Green Bay, it has to be because you show up more pissed off to play football on Sunday afternoon. And I think that's going to have to be the formula here. And you're going to have to play buttoned up. You're going to have to play disciplined, especially against the Brian Flores defense, especially against the Kevin O'Connell offense. It's so damn annoying that the Vikings and the Lions are so well coached. It's so annoying that is the case.
They win the penalty battle every time.
Please, bad team X, go hire Brian Flores. Ben Johnson, please get up the hell out of the NFC North. Aaron Glenn, I don't really care that much. But you know, congratulations on the New Orleans Saints job, I guess. So Ross Jackson will enjoy that. I know he will.
Somebody has to take it, huh?
So, well, theoretically, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
So yeah, what is your feel for where we are right now with this game? Like, is there a key injury? Like, or are you ready to just pronounce that this is a Vikings victory?
No, I mean it's a 1.5 spread. It should be a tough game. For both sides. Should be a hard fought game. If it's not, I think that's more surprising than one side winning or the other.
I agree.
Here's like where my heart is at right now, because the last 3 years the Vikings have won the first game of the season against the Packers, and then they've played them the second to last week of the year and gotten absolutely curb stomped. And I know that players who have been in the building for all of those, the Justin Jeffersons of the world, guys on the old line, you know, guys that have been in there, you know, because that goes back to Zimmer. And I don't think anybody on the defense, the whole defense is turned around from even 2 years ago. Like Patrick Peterson's not here anymore, you know. But
how long is Harrison
guys who have been in the
like,
building for all of that? Say what?
Harrison Phillips has got to remember some of that. Yeah.
Harrison Phillips. Well, he wasn't here in 2021, and it's like I think that happened then too. But like it was Michael Pierce that year. But it's been this like extremely predictable thing that like the Vikings will just fall totally flat on their face. But this has been the year of the Vikings breaking the curses that they've always had. Kickers were missing field goals against them. They won in Seattle. Like they're doing things they haven't done in 20 years. So can this be the next thing? And I think this is more of a test, right? I mean, the Packers are playing better than any of the last like 9 teams they've played, right? So this becomes the test. They got to play the Packers, the Lions, and then playoffs teams, right? So really the playoff caliber football starts now. What do you have in you? And by the way, can you buck this tradition of totally falling flat on your face the second time you play Matt LaFleur? Like that's where my like heart is at. What actually happens? I have no idea. And I think you're overconfident if you say you absolutely know what's going to happen.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I don't. I mean, again, it's early in the week as we record this, but I don't have a great feel for this game. I've had, I will say, and I was just saying this to someone, a league source that I was talking to, that like, look, I there have been years where we've done this. I don't know if you feel this, where I have not had a great feel for the team. Like 2019, I did not understand that Packers team at all. I feel like this is probably the best I've understood a Packers team this year. Or like this season, since 2017 that I've been doing this. This is the best I've understood a Packers team. I think they're going to try their very hardest to win this game. But I do feel like there is that incentive difference, that these teams are close enough that where we are right now with this team is, I think that could end up being the difference. That the fact that this is still the 1 seed on the line.
But the Vikings have more to play for.
Is there's more pressure. And I wonder, this version of this Vikings team, Sam Darnold, they have not really had a game like that, where that has been the case. Now, the end of the Seahawks game, you know, maybe notwithstanding, we'll see.
Yeah.
And that's where I think if you're the Packers, you're going to say, okay, you know, we know our best game is good enough to beat this Vikings team. Is rinsing the bad taste out of your mouth, is pride, is divisional rivalry, is all that stuff. Is that enough? And there is this big game monkey that the Packers kind of want to get off their back. They have not beaten a really good team in a big spot like this season yet. And so if they want to go be an NFC Super Bowl contender, they have to go beat a good team to do it, right? So this is their opportunity. And so that's where I am with the game right now.
No matter what happens here, both of us, one of us is like gonna go for 3 of these crossovers with Matt Derry. Like it just feels inevitable that one of us is gonna go play in the Lions one way or another. But there's still a lot of this.
It would not surprise me if you, me, and Matt have an extra one all.
If we all did, yeah. If that was like the path to the Super Bowl is through the other two NFC North teams.
Luke's got you covered with Vikings coverage at Locked On Vikings, and Peter has it covered with Packers coverage over at Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Only 2 games in the 4 p.m. slate this time around. Again, like we talked about, there are a lot of games throughout the whole entire week, so that means less for Sunday. That last matchup is the Dolphins and the Browns. 2 teams that, again, relative to expectations, have been pretty disappointing. Miami still technically alive in the playoff race, but again, they're on the outside looking in, and the Browns just looking ahead to next season. So we have Spencer German of Locked On Browns and Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins talking about keys to victory for each side.
Okay, Spencer, I know there's a lot of to do about the Dolphins in cold weather. And it sounds like we're going to have a decently mild game with a 4:00 kick. This game obviously got flexed out of Sunday Night Football, but it sounds like there might be a little bit of precipitation. Is that something that I don't know how close your nose is to the forecast as far as side-eyeing it or anything like that?
Last I saw, and it is Christmas week, so I have been kind of checked out on these things, but last I looked, it was, I think, like 50-ish degrees and going to rain on Sunday. Yes. So, and we were just in the locker room the day we recorded this, and we were asking players about that because there is obviously this reputation that the Dolphins can't play in cold weather. And so, players are kind of answering whether or not they thought that would have helped their cause and been sort of a home field advantage for them. And they downplayed it, of course. Like somebody mentioned, well, they played in Green Bay early this year, so they're used to it. But yeah, if the Browns had any hope, or if fans had any hope that was going to help the Dolphins maybe put together a bad game, it doesn't look like that's going to be in the cards. Although maybe the rain limits the passing game a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, the Tua Tagovailoa was asked on Thursday about the last time he played in a colder environment in the rain, and it was week 17 in 2021, I think, was the last time they played against the Titans. And Tua said, the first thing I remember about that game is I did not play well and we lost. So these opportunities are fairly limited for Miami. So I think the rain is an interesting element to watch, where the team is coming off of a successful performance on the ground against San Francisco, but they had not run the ball well for 2 months prior to that. I mean, we're talking rushing yardages in the 40s and 50s per game. So if the rain becomes heavy at any stretch throughout the game, that is an element there that I think is just an extra storyline to watch. But I, for one, am thankful that we will not have a recreation of that Thursday game with Pittsburgh and Cleveland from earlier this year, because narratives are narratives for a reason. And I have no doubt that would not have been a fun experience for the Dolphins to play.
Yeah. That whole thing's funny because we're obviously going through, I don't know how well other fan bases are aware of this, but the Browns are right now going through a whole new stadium situation where the owners are funding this new project closer to their team facility, which isn't in downtown. It's a whole thing. We don't have to get into the minutia of that. But after that game, there was this new, like, this chorus of people that had been, the ones claiming like, oh, we need an open air stadium because the new stadium is going to be a dome. They all came back out of the woodwork. They were like, oh, see, this is why we keep it in. We have an open air stadium because we can get games like this. And it was not just neglecting the fact that those happen like once every, 10 years that you get a game like that. So it's not like it's really that big of a factor. And then a couple weeks later, there was actually, I guess was it the Chiefs game? I guess. Yeah, I think it was the Chiefs game 2 weeks ago. It was like a rainy day and there was like nobody in the stands. And it was like, so this is the weather. This is the weather that you're forgetting about. Like most days you get this, you don't get the cool snowstorm where the Browns win and the nostalgia of it all isn't there. So this is why you want to know.
Well, let's get into a couple keys to victory. I'd love to hear from your perspective. What does a win for the Browns look like on Sunday?
Yeah, I do think that the tackling has to be, front of mind because the Dolphins. I think this offense is known. Tyreek Hill's Tyreek Hill. He can show the top every now and then. And there were some guys talking about that in the locker room this week already. But like the way that this team plays, like we talked about, the shorter passes, trying to get guys in space to kind of like run and be able to make plays. You got to have sound tackling in this game on defense. And that's kind of like the biggest point that I'm looking at on the defensive side is like just limiting what this offense with all their amazing skill players are able to do. On the rest of it for me comes down to what the offense is going to do and how effective they're actually going to be. Because last week there was moments in the second half where they could move the ball, but they went after their first drive where a 66-yard run got them down to the 10, and then they got to the goal line and fumbled, and then the Bengals go down 99 yards and score. After that first drive, the Browns went 3 and out their next like 3 drives, and then had like a 5-play, 15-yard drive and punted after that one as well. Like this offense with Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to have to find ways to put up points. They're going to have to do better in terms of moving the football up and down the field. And on a sloppy day, like we alluded to, that could be a little bit harder. And I honestly do think like they got to find a way to get this run game going. They had the big explosive play last week with Jerome Ford, but they got to have like more consistent, I think, running game, because I think that gets Dorian Thompson-Robinson a little bit more comfortable. And he is part of that because he is a mobile quarterback. Like he can do some things with his legs. But if they can get this run game going, especially in sloppy weather, they can get DTR a little bit more comfortable back there, then I think that sets him up to make some of the necessary plays in the passing game. And they got to be able to get Jerry Jeudy the ball. He had 3 targets last week. That's a problem. And if you're going to be missing David Njoku and potentially Cedric Tillman as well, you got to get the ball to the playmakers that you have out there. So, I think those are kind of the big things I'm looking at in terms of trying to beat this Miami team. I know that's not going to be easy because they do have a pretty stout defense in their own right. I think they're top 8 in the league, somewhere around there. But yeah, so I don't love, based on how the offense played last week, I'm a little bit weary of this matchup just in general. But yeah, I think that's kind of what it looks like. What about from the Dolphins' perspective? What are some of the big things you have your eyes on in terms of keys to get that team to be heading home with the win?
Yeah, I think they should probably be invested in matching Jalen Ramsey with Jerry Jeudy in this game. And there's been some times in games where Garrett Wilson, who's a player who has some of the same movement skills as Jerry Jeudy, where Jerry Jeudy has this suddenness at the top of routes where he can just explode and snap out of what seems like it's a straight vertical press. Garrett Wilson tested Jalen Ramsey with a couple of those the first time the Dolphins played the Jets just a couple weeks ago, and Ramsey matched up with Wilson for much of that game. So I think it gives you the best chance when the other alternatives is Kendall Fuller, their veteran corner, who's the CB2, looks like he's going to be out for this game. So that's going to have Kader Kohu, who's been traditionally the nickel, is going to be the other outside corner. And then you're getting into a situation where do you potentially play some big nickel and have a third safety that's out there? Yeah. They've had a third corner in an undrafted free agent in Storm Duck, who they've really liked, who's got some big opportunities in big spots. But frankly, the last time we saw him play was against the Packers, and he played terribly and was a big part of the reason why Miami had some failures to get key stops in big moments throughout the course of that game. So I don't think they want to really play that game with Jerry Jeudy against those other alternatives. So I think that one of the first keys to victory is putting Jalen Ramsey on Jerry Jeudy and say, hey, if you're going to feed Jeudy the ball, we're going to have our best guy consistently on coverage against him and take our chances there and see how that plays out for us. I think winning on first down for the Dolphins on both sides of the ball is really important. The Dolphins have one of the higher run stuff rates as far as when they have the football, and it sets them behind on 2nd and 11, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 10. Those kinds of conditions going against a pass rusher like Myles Garrett, you want to mitigate as much as possible. So that may mean you come out and you spread the field, and you as long as it's the weather's going to cooperate from a throwing perspective, you go empty and you just kind of find an easy completion and set up a 2nd and 6 and kind of get yourself into a more favorable down and distance before you get back into your regular offensive script and whatever that looks like. But case in point, the Browns are 9th in third down defense percentage. It's under 35 or 36% conversion rate on third downs this year, and they're dead last in the league on offense on third downs. So the more 2nd and 10s plus and 3rd and 7s plus you can put Cleveland in situationally, when they have the ball, I think is a big point of emphasis for where that team really measures metrically well right now, and trying not to feed into those with what you do on either side of the ball. So I think those are two obvious things. And for a defense that hasn't generated turnovers with any consistency this year, they have 2 turnovers in the last 4 games. To see a team coming to town that's got 12 turnovers in the last 3 games, you got to take advantage of a young player at the quarterback position to put yourself in a position to win that game. So I think those are things for Miami that maybe they're a little bit less schematically, and there's some bounce of the ball luck that's involved with some of that. But I think that's the recipe for Miami is win the early downs and play your matchups, put your best player on their best player, and then see how the rest of the game can organically play out for you.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I do think, the turnovers have been one of the biggest problems for this team, and along the lines of like getting DTR comfortable. He's got to be able to protect that football better. Because while they've been turnover machines on offense, they have not been turnover machines on defense, and their turnover differentials there's a massive discrepancy there, and that's part of the reason why they are 3-12 and find themselves where they're at. So, I think that's obviously super critical, super important, and I think that third down stat is what I was alluding to, where it's like the defense hasn't been as bad as people have made it out to be this year. And like they can keep the Browns in games, and I could see that happening on Sunday, but can the offense do enough to, match or stay pace with a team like Miami who can put up points in a hurry at times? That's the big question.
Spencer has your spot for Browns coverage over at Locked On Browns, and Kyle has your spot for Dolphins coverage over at Locked On Dolphins, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. 2 primetime games in Week 17 that have big implications in the NFL. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss what our local experts have to say about those games coming up next on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime, and this holiday season, it's really great to go to live events during the holidays. You can go make new memories, and it's really nice to be able to even go back and look at memories that you've made from past holiday seasons. Gametime is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your live events even easier. Gametime Picks. Photos off the flip to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And so the playoffs, they are coming to the NFL very, very quickly, as we only have 2 weeks to go. And then after Week 17, 1 week, and then we're already to the postseason. So if you want to find a playoff ticket deal, be sure to go to Gametime. They have super deals and other tiers of deals. Plus, they have a bunch of great features on the app, such as Gametime Picks, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Back on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, rounding out Week 17 coverage. Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you here. Again, after Week 17 is done, we will have 1 more week to go until the playoffs begin, which is super exciting, but it also feels like we were just here talking about Week 1 of the regular season. It was all just starting up, and now we're coming to the very, very end. But 2 big primetime matchups in Week 17, starting off the Atlanta Falcons and the Washington Commanders. 2 teams who are fighting for a playoff spot in that wild card, and 2 rookie quarterbacks will be facing off against one another in Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix Jr. So Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, David Harrison of Locked On Commanders, take you through which young quarterback will get the best of the other.
This week's crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Commanders is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. We're going to get into the 3 things that each side of this competition must do in order to win. And Aaron Freeman, we're going to kick it off with you. The Atlanta Falcons visiting the Washington Commanders Sunday Night Football, Week 17. What are the 3 things that you think the Atlanta Falcons have to do in order to get the upset win over the Washington Commanders?
So the main 3 things: number 1, contain the quarterback with pressure; number 2, win the turnover battle; and number 3, spread the football around on offense. I think, going back to number 1, as we've discussed a lot, like, you got to get Jaden Daniels on the ground. Again, he's going to pop some runs. He's going to
do some things that we have seen him do throughout his rookie season, but you can't let that sort of take over the game in the ways that previous running quarterbacks or mobile quarterbacks have been able to do against this Falcons defense. And that starts with that front four being able to get reliable pressure on him to get him on the ground, not only as a passer, but also as a runner and containing him in that way. I think with the turnovers, I think that's been, at least in my eyes, a big part of Washington's kind of recent struggles, where for the first, 7-8 games of the season, they rarely turn the ball over. And these last couple of weeks, you've seen them, turn the ball over a ton, especially last week. And so if the Falcons can be opportunistic and guys like Jesse Bates can get those interceptions on the back end and they can force fumbles like Philadelphia was able to do and play a clean game, which is something that Michael Penix out again. He had an interception before the halftime, but that was basically a drop pass by Kyle Pitts. Not his fault. And that's been a big issue. That's a big reason why Kirk Cousins is no longer starting, because the Falcons could not protect the football. So we need to see a clean game from Michael Penix. We need to see a clean game from this Falcons offense as far as turnovers go, and hopefully a very dirty game for the Washington Commanders when it comes to turnovers. And then the last thing is spread the ball around. Kyle Pitts has been basically a much maligned player among Falcon fans, but there's no doubt that this Falcons offense is better when he's involved, along with Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, and it becomes a pick your poison with all these different weapons that the Falcons have. If they can get back to playing that style of football with Michael Penix like they were playing earlier in the season when this offense was really humming under Kirk Cousins during the illustrious month of Kirktober, that is something that this team can, really use to, and that's, I think, going to be a big part of if they are able to put up enough points against this Commanders team to win this game, because I don't think the offense is going to be able to score 20 points like they did last week. They got 2 defensive touchdowns off of pick sixes last week. But I do think the offense is going to probably need to score 28 plus or whatever in order to win this game, given how hot this Commanders offense is. And I think they can do that if they can spread the ball around.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head on a lot of those things. Speaking of that turnover margin, though, man, 5 offensive giveaways. I personally have obviously never seen a team win a game doing that. And Dan Quinn said he's never seen a team do that. And shout out to Chick Hernandez of WSA 9 here out in the DC area. He did some digging and found out that it was the first time in 86 occurrences that a team turned the ball over 5 times, allowed 30 points to their opponent, and won. It's amazing. That just kind of shows you how rare it is. Obviously, the Commanders are happy they got that win. They don't want to get another win that way. They're +2 overall in the season now after that terrible turnover game in the overall turnover margin. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there, because Dan Quinn, I guarantee you, Joe Witt Jr., Cliff Kingsbury, when they talk on Thursday, the 2 coordinators for the Commanders are going to harp on turnovers, not turning the ball over, getting more takeaways. Obviously, Washington Commanders fans would love to see Mikey Sainristil repeat his 1 interception for an 81-yard return against Michael Penix Jr. that he had the last time these 2 guys saw each other. It's all love, of course, though. For the Commanders, the 3 things they've got to do, Aaron: establish that ground game without having to rely on Jaden Daniels to do it. We talked about that earlier in the episode. The reason that's the main storyline for the offense is because that is the first thing I think this team absolutely is going to want to do. Number 2, stifle Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, that 2-headed rushing attack. This run defense has not been great over the course of the season. The Atlanta Falcons are one of the best in being able to do that. Because I have Bijan Robinson on my fantasy team, obviously I'm not a fan of Tyler Algier, but outside of that, big fan of both of these guys for a good reason. And take advantage of Michael Penix's pocket tendency. Take advantage of the fact that they can kind of get after him a little bit more aggressively than they can some other quarterbacks, and score early. The best way to take the ball out of Bijan's hands, out of Tyler's hands, score early, force the Atlanta Falcons to lean on Michael Penix Jr. No shade to Michael Penix Jr. Anytime you have a rookie quarterback in their second start, I guarantee you, New York Giants, week 2, they said, let's force Jaden Daniels to beat us. Now, Jaden Daniels in a rookie franchise record 7 field goals did beat them. The Commanders are going to take the same approach here. Make Michael Penix Jr. beat you, and they're going to hope that they don't give up the points to allow him to do so. So I think those are the 3 things that the Washington Commanders have to do.
Be sure you check out David over at Locked On Commanders and Aaron over at Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding everything out here, you got the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers, a rematch of the NFC Championship game that saw the San Francisco 49ers victorious last year. Bit of a different time for the 49ers as they really have struggled with injuries and just have not been the same team this year. Meanwhile, the Lions dealing with a bunch of injuries themselves, but they've been able to overcome miraculously and are still in position to potentially be the NFC's #1 seed. So Matt Derry of Locked On Lions, Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers, take you through if the Lions can come out with a victory or if the 49ers can pull the upset.
All right, Matt, I don't know if you have any more specific keys and key matchups in this one, but I would like you to paint the picture of what a Lions victory looks like, and it probably wouldn't look a lot different than the way the way the Lions have won a lot of games this year.
No, Brian, I think first and foremost, this team just has to continue to move the football down the field and have that explosive offense do what they do. You're talking about Jared Goff coming back to the Bay Area, of course, always loves doing that. Wants to kind of get that monkey off his back. In San Francisco, I know he's had some success in the past against the Niners when he was with the Rams, but again, taste in their mouth is a bad one from last year, and they want to go out there in that same stadium and win. So if they're continuing to spread the football around, whether it's St. Brown, whether it's Jamison Williams on a deep ball, whether it's Sam Laporta, Gibbs in the backfield, and now they showed some depth this past week with the injury to Montgomery, where Craig Reynolds got some touches and Sione Vaki. So they're using everybody. So I think number one, it's just keep the offense on the field and keep doing what they're doing, which is putting up 30 a game and leading the league. Number two is that Brock Purdy factor from a year ago. They allowed him to scramble way too much in that second half and get the Niners back into that game and obviously ahead to win. Limiting kind of those scramble drill plays with Purdy where it's that 3rd and 11 and they've got him bottled up and all of a sudden he goes for 17. That cannot happen. This past week, the Lions did a great job staying in their lanes on Caleb Williams, pressured him. He had a decent second half and had a couple of nice balls. The stats were kind of inflated, but for the most part, didn't let him run wild. Not that that's something Caleb does, but we saw Purdy do it in the NFC title game. So I think if those things come to fruition, I think the Lions will win. And I got them at 27-17 this week. What about you?
Yeah, I don't like the way this looks for the 49ers with where they're at. Everything's just been a little bit too difficult for the 49ers, and you play against a powerhouse offense like the Detroit Lions. At this point, I can't project that the 49ers would just score enough points to win. So they're going to need some help. They're going to need some funny things to happen. They're going to need a Jared Goff interception. They're going to need a Jahmyr Gibbs fumble. They're going to need a pick six. They're going to need a Deebo Samuel kickoff return for a touchdown. I think that's really the path for the 49ers right now, because I don't think they can stand toe to toe with good football teams with the way they're put together and the way they're playing football, and things are just too difficult. And if the Lions are putting up 30 points, I can't imagine the 49ers get there. And they would have to keep this game low scoring, get a little bit of help, get some turnovers. It'd have to be that kind of game, I think, for the 49ers, be able to run the ball a little bit. You might see a little wide back with Deebo Samuel in the backfield, and they would have to obviously make some big plays there and obviously not turn over the ball themselves. So, I think it would take some doing. And to be honest with you, Matt, when I look at this line, I was surprised how low it is. I think it should be more than 4 points. And I know the 49ers have a really strong contingency of people who put money on them. And so their lines might sometimes be skewed in their favor a little bit. I feel like this should be a touchdown line, right? The Lions should go in and win this game. And the way you put it out there too, the picture you paint of a team that has a chip on their shoulder, on top of it, little extra fight. That sounds like a potentially a big win for the Lions against the San Francisco 49ers. And really the 49ers have been the opposite team that they've been in that NFC Championship game last year against the Lions, because they've been a team that cannot come back in the fourth quarter. They've been a team that cannot close anybody out in the fourth quarter. So if the Lions have any kind of a lead, that's something that's going to grow in the fourth quarter, not the other way around. And if the Niners have a lead going into the fourth quarter, unless it's like a 3-touchdown lead, I don't think 49ers fans would even feel that was safe.
It's crazy to think that San Francisco has already been eliminated here, as we got 2 more games to go in that division where Arizona's like, I don't want it. Seattle, you take it. Seattle's like, we don't want it either. Now all of a sudden it looks like it's the Rams. So it's been a wild year, certainly. Do you think the Niners play hard? Do you think now that they've been officially eliminated that there could be some guys mailing it in this week?
I would worry about that. Last week, I was surprised because they were actually eliminated just before kickoff because of the Washington outcome and the I don't remember what the other game was. I think it was the Rams win or something that already sealed their fate. And so they still played hard, and there was still some, despite the offensive line not playing great, and despite losing that game, there was big performances, and Brock Purdy played pretty well, except for some problems at the end and an unfortunate turnover late. Deebo Samuel had his best game of the year, breaking tackles, looking like vintage Deebo. George Kittle was really good. There were some really good individual performances, and guys were out there playing hard. And I just don't think. I think that's one thing that you can always bank on with the 49ers, and it's really the reason that they've hit on so many late-round picks and some of these guys. It's because of the way they're wired. Like Talanoa Hufanga is not going to shut it down. He's going to be a wild man. Nick Bosa is always going to play hard. He's got a motor that's not going to stop. Brock Purdy has a lot of guts. He's not a guy that's going to lay down, and George Kittle's definitely wired the same way. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of quit in the 49ers, but I could see a game that starts to get out of hand for them, and then it's just like, okay. And the Niners at some point have to start seeing some other players and finding out who wants to be a part of the next team in 2025. So I think you might start seeing some changes with the 49ers saying, okay, Fred, you're playing on a broken ankle. Let's go get surgery on that. So you're not like, oh, he's still healing up on July 27th. You want to get that squared away. So, I think maybe from the top down, they might start looking at things. But I do think that the 49ers have a lot of players, and I can't speak for all 53 guys on the roster, but they're not the type of guys that are going to shut it down. So I think there is going to be a lot of feeling within the organization that this team, just all they need to do is run it back. And maybe that's the wrong feeling, because I think sometimes that is the wrong feeling. But I think that's the vibe around the organization. We had the injury bug hit us. Let's add a few pieces and run it back.
All right, Brian. Well, we'll see what happens on Monday night, my friend. Always a pleasure.
Monday Night Football. I expect a big Lions win. It's not enough points. You're scaring me the more I hear you talk about the chip on the shoulder from this Lions team.
They want this game, man. It was just like last year when they got screwed in Dallas, and they went down to Dallas and put up, almost a 50 burger on the Cowboys. They want this one. So regardless of what Minnesota does the day before.
It reminds me of last year. We saw the 49ers do this to the Philadelphia Eagles, because they were mad about what happened in the previous NFC Championship game. They didn't have a quarterback, and they said this would have gone differently. And they went out on the field and proved how differently it would have gone. And if you get that sort of Lions football team out there, this could really get away from the San Francisco 49ers. This is the least confident I've been in a 49ers game coming into it this year, partly because of the way the 49ers are playing, but partly because who's on the other side in the Detroit Lions.
Matt is great. Check him out over at Locked On Lions. Brian is great. Check him out over at Locked On 49ers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you today on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll be back here next week for our last regular season edition of 2024. We'll be breaking down key storylines, keys to victory, and so much more, as we always do. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you back here next time on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show.